Belong here. My sister-in-law said it quietly, almost sweetly, the way people say things they've rehearsed 100 times. She leaned close enough that I could smell her perfume. Something expensive, something my brother probably paid for. And she smiled. The help ruins the prestige. I didn't move. I didn't reach for a response. I looked past her shoulder at the restaurant, full of people dressed in clothes that cost more than my monthly rent. And I made a decision in that moment. By the time the appetizers hit the table, she would understand exactly what kind of mistake she had just made. But before I tell you how my sister-in-law's anniversary dinner became the most expensive meal she never got to finish, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from and what time it is there. I want to see how far this reaches. Let me back up. My brother Elliot has always been the golden one. I say this without bitterness, or at least I used to. He was the one who got the car at 16, the one who got the college fund fully paid, the one my mother introduced first at every family gathering. I was the afterthought daughter, the quiet one, the one who, according to family mythology, hadn't quite figured out her life yet. The truth is, I figured it out at 23 and just never told anyone. Elliot married Faye 3 years ago. Faye came from what she called a good family, which meant her parents had a house in Connecticut, a timeshare in Hilton Head, and an opinion about everything. She was beautiful in the specific, calculated way of someone who spent significant resources maintaining it. She was also the kind of woman who sorted people the second they walked into a room. You are either useful or invisible. She had decided within 20 minutes of meeting me that I was invisible. I wore a clearance rack blouse to their engagement party. It was fine, clean, pressed, but she clocked it immediately. She made a comment about thrift shopping being such a brave choice. Everyone laughed a little. My brother laughed too. I smiled. I filed it away. I kept quiet. That was 4 years ago. I had learned by then that silence is not the same as surrender. Here is what my family believed about me: that I worked in property management, that I drove a used Civic because I couldn't afford better, that I was renting a 2-bedroom in a mid-range neighborhood and probably struggling with student loans, like most people my age. That belief was partially my fault, because I had not corrected it. I had let my father tell the story of my career in vague terms. She works in real estate. Something to do with commercial properties? And I had never stepped in to give specifics. The specifics were this: I was the founder and majority owner of a hospitality consulting group that I had quietly built over the previous 6 years. We worked exclusively with distressed restaurant groups, multi-location operations, bleeding money, family-owned chains hemorrhaging on bad leases, high-concept dining rooms that had burned through 2 rounds of investors and were circling the drain. I came in, assessed, restructured, and either flipped them into profitable operations or negotiated controlled exits that saved the principals from bankruptcy. I had done it 11 times. I had a waiting list. 3 of my current clients were restaurant groups in the city where my brother lived. One of them was Harlow & Reed. Harlow & Reed was the kind of restaurant that existed in every mid-size American city, the place where the upper middle class went to feel cosmopolitan. High ceilings, exposed brick, a wine list that required a sommelier to explain, a chef whose name appeared in local magazine profiles twice a year. It was the place where Faye held her charity committee lunches. It was the place my brother proposed to her, apparently. It was the place she had booked for their 3rd anniversary dinner. The dinner I was invited to as an afterthought because my mother had insisted on it being a family affair. What Faye did not know, because my involvement was structured through a holding company with a name that gave nothing away, was that I had purchased a 49% stake in Harlow & Reed 8 months earlier, when the owners came to me in a quiet panic over a lease renegotiation that had gone catastrophically wrong. I had restructured their management agreements, renegotiated their supplier contracts, and installed a new general manager, a woman named Petra, who had run operations for a Michelin-starred group in Chicago before moving back home to be near family. Petra knew who I was. The original owners knew who I was. The front of house staff had been briefed that if I ever came in, I was to be treated as ownership. Quietly, without announcement, without fuss. Just the way I liked it. I had never had occasion to use that arrangement until the anniversary dinner. I arrived at the restaurant in the blouse I had worn to work that day. Not the clearance rack kind. This one was silk, off-white, from a small Italian brand that didn't advertise. It didn't announce itself. That was the point. Faye would look at it and see ordinary. That was fine. I had stopped needing people to see me correctly a long time ago. My mother was already seated when I arrived. She waved me toward a chair at the far end of the table, the one tucked half behind a structural column. Not the best seat. But my mother had a way of managing rooms that she believed was invisible, and I had learned not to fight it in small moments. I was saving my energy. Faye arrived 10 minutes late, which was intentional. She always made an entrance. She was in a dress that I clocked immediately as this season and recently purchased. Not because I followed fashion, but because I tracked spending. And Faye's credit card habits had come up obliquely in a conversation with my brother 6 months ago when he called me to ask if I could spare anything because they were having a rough quarter. I told him I didn't have extra liquid right now. I had said it gently. He had sighed and said, okay, and we had moved on. But I thought about that conversation as I watched Faye float into the restaurant in her new dress, air-kissing the hostess like they were old friends. She got to the table, made her rounds, kissed my mother on the cheek, put her hand briefly on my father's arm, and then she got to me. Her smile didn't change exactly. It recalibrated. The warmth dialed down to polite, the way you adjust a thermostat, efficient and automatic. "Oh," she said, "you made it." "I did," I said. "Happy anniversary." She looked at my blouse. A half-second pause, long enough to be intentional, short enough to deny. Then she moved on. Dinner started. The bread came. The wine was poured. A bottle Elliot had pre-selected from the list. Something in the mid-range. Nothing remarkable. Conversations broke into clusters. My father talked to Elliot. My mother managed both sides of the table the way she always did. Faye held court at her end. I sat near my mother, ate my bread, and listened. The conversation turned, the way conversations at family dinners always do, to the question of what everyone was doing, how things were going, what the future looked like. Elliot mentioned a promotion possibility at his firm. My mother mentioned her garden, and then, because there were only so many directions the table could go, it came around to me. Faye was the one who asked. She always was. So, and she said it with that particular light tone that women like her perfect casual on the surface and deliberate underneath. "Are you still doing the property management thing?" I said yes. She tilted her head. She had a half glass of wine in her hand and the candlelight caught the diamonds in her earrings, which I happened to know were the earrings Elliot had asked me to help pay for 18 months ago because he had been short that month and it was their anniversary. And he really wanted to do something meaningful. I had transferred $1,200 from my account to his. He had called me his lifesaver. Faye had never mentioned them in my presence. "There's good money in that?" she asked. She said it the way you might ask someone if there was good money in selling crafts on Etsy. Polite skepticism dressed as curiosity. My mother shifted in her chair. She always moved when she sensed tension. Her body's way of trying to manage a room without speaking. "I can pay my bills," I said. Faye laughed. A light, social laugh, the kind that isn't unkind on the surface. "I'm sure you can. I just always wondered. And I hope this doesn't come out wrong, but you've always seemed like someone with so much potential. It seems like a waste to be stuck managing someone else's properties at your age." She said it warmly. That was the thing about Faye. The blade was always warm when it went in. I looked at her. I looked at my brother, who was studying his bread plate with great interest. I looked at my father, who was looking at the middle distance the way he did when he was choosing not to witness something. I looked at my mother, who gave me the smallest, most helpless look, the one that said, "Please don't make a scene." I picked up my water glass. I took a sip. I said, "You're right, I should probably be doing more." And I smiled and I let it go, and Faye looked satisfied and the appetizers arrived. I excused myself to use the restroom. I didn't go to the restroom. I went to find Petra. She was in the back hallway near the office, going over something on a tablet. She saw me coming and straightened. "Hey," she said, "I didn't know you were coming in tonight." "Family dinner," I said. I kept my voice low. "Quick question. What's the status on the Hargreave table?" "That's my brother's party. Table 12. She checked her tablet. "Private event booking. 3-course prix, full wine service. Signed the standard event contract 2 weeks ago. Everything's prepaid." "I need you to pull the event contract for me, the one they signed." She pulled it up on the tablet, turned the screen toward me. I scrolled to section 9. Every Harlow and Reed private event contract included a conduct clause. I had insisted on it after a consultant friend had described an incident at his restaurant the previous year involving a private party that had devolved badly and left 2 servers in tears. Section 9 gave ownership the right to terminate a private event immediately in cases of harassment, intimidation, or conduct that created a hostile environment for staff or other guests. I had not been planning to use it. Faye's comment was not legally enough. It was aimed at a guest, not staff. It was rude, not actionable. But I had seen the way she spoke to the server who brought the bread, the way she hadn't looked at him, the way she'd snapped her fingers and pointed at the butter, without making eye contact. Then said something to my mother about how service had really slipped in this city. I asked Petra, "Has anything happened at table 12 tonight? Anything on the floor?" Petra looked at me for a moment. Then she said, "One of the servers mentioned the woman in the red dress snapped at him when he brought the wrong dressing on the side salad. He said she told him he needed to learn to pay attention to paying customers. He's 19. He was pretty rattled." I handed her back the tablet. "Okay," I said, "give me 10 minutes. Then cut the private event music at table 12 and turn up the house lights to full. Let me know when you're ready." She looked at me carefully. "You sure?" I thought about $1,200 that bought earrings I was never thanked for. I thought about a phone call where my brother sighed and said, "Okay," and I had sat in my apartment afterward feeling like a vending machine with a loyalty card. I thought about "You've always seemed like someone with so much potential," said warmly over candlelight, while Faye wore diamonds I helped purchase. "I'm sure," I said. I walked back to the table. I sat down. The main courses arrived. I ate quietly, and I listened to Faye describe a charity auction she was organizing, the vision she had for it, the people she was hoping to get involved. She was good at talking about herself in the language of community. It was a skill. I acknowledged that neutrally. My father asked Elliot about his car. They talked for a while about horsepower. My mother asked me if I was seeing anyone, and I said not right now, and she made the face she always made, the one that contained 7 different concerns she was choosing not to voice. The main courses were cleared. The dessert menus came out. And then the music stopped. It didn't fade. It cut mid-note the way sound cuts when something is switched off at the source. The restaurant went noticeably quiet. The house lights came up, not harshly, but fully. The candlelit intimacy replaced by a clean, clear brightness. Faye looked up from her dessert menu with a small frown. She glanced around. "What happened to the music?" I set down my menu. I pushed back my chair and stood up. My mother said my name. I heard it from a distance, the way you hear things when you've already made a decision and your body is already moving. I crossed to the small raised area near the host stand where Petra was waiting. Petra handed me the portable microphone they used for private events and stepped back. The restaurant wasn't large and it wasn't loud. I didn't need to project. I spoke at a normal volume and the room heard me clearly. "I want to apologize for the interruption," I said. "My name is Ava Sterling. I'm a co-owner of Harlow and Reed. I have a brief matter to address with one of our private event parties, and then we'll get you all back to your evenings. I could see table 12 from where I stood. My mother's face, my father, finally looking at something directly. Elliot, very still. And Faye, who had gone from confused to calculating in the space of a second, her eyes had sharpened. I could see her running through the math. I turned slightly toward Petra, and Petra brought a tablet to my side. I didn't need it for what I was about to say, but I wanted it visible. I wanted people to understand this was documented. Table 12 tonight is a private event booking for an anniversary dinner, I said, keeping my voice even. Earlier this evening, the guest of honor at that table. I didn't look at Faye directly, I looked just past her. Directed a comment toward a member of our service staff that was demeaning and unnecessary. Our team here works hard. They deserve to do that work without being spoken to like they are less than. Faye's chair scraped back. She stood. I could feel my mother's held breath from across the room. This is insane, Faye said. Her voice was controlled, but the edges were fraying. I am a regular here. Elliot, tell her. Section 9 of your private event contract, I said, gives Harlow and Reed ownership the right to end a private event immediately if any guest engages in conduct that creates a hostile or demeaning environment for our staff. I'm invoking that tonight. Faye's mouth opened. Elliot was on his feet now. What are you talking about? He looked at me the way he used to look at me when we were children, and I had done something he didn't understand. The difference was that now he was genuinely unsure of what was happening, and that uncertainty on my older brother's face, after a lifetime of him being the one who was sure about everything, was something I had not anticipated feeling as much as I did. She can't do this, Faye said to him. She's nobody. She manages apartment buildings. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I opened the holding company documentation. The ownership records I had looked at that morning for an entirely different reason and had not closed out. I crossed to the table, and I set the phone face up in front of my brother. He looked down at it. He read for a moment. He looked up at me. Ava, he said. 49%, I said, through a holding company. I've been a co-owner for 8 months. The table was very quiet. The tables near us, the rest of the restaurant, people were trying not to stare and failing. Elliot sat back down slowly, like his legs had made the decision before his brain had. He looked at Faye. She looked at him. Something passed between them that I wasn't meant to see. I took a breath, because the next part wasn't something I had planned to say in public, and wasn't something I had fully planned to say at all. But the evening had gone the way it had gone, and I was already standing here, so... I want to say something else, I said, and my voice came out quieter than before. Not to the room, just to my family, because I had been quiet about a lot of things for a long time, and I think tonight is the night that stops. My mother had her hand pressed to the side of her face. My father was watching me with an expression I had not seen before. 3 years ago, I said, Elliot called me because you two were having a rough month. He asked me for money toward the earrings Faye is wearing tonight. I sent $1,200. I didn't say anything about it because it felt like something you did for family and then let go of. Faye's hand went involuntarily to her ear. 2 years ago, I said, Dad called me because the business was in trouble and they were behind on the SBA loan. I wire transferred $18,000 over 3 months. Nobody asked where it came from, and I didn't offer. My father made a sound that wasn't quite a word. And 18 months ago, I said, Elliot, you called me because your lease buyout on the condo was due, and you were short. I covered $11,000. You said you'd pay me back. I said, don't worry about it. I meant it. I said all of it quietly. I wasn't angry. I had realized somewhere in the last 15 minutes that I wasn't actually angry, that the anger had dissolved somewhere between the moment Faye said, You've always seemed like someone with so much potential, and the moment I found Petra in the hallway. What I felt instead was clear, like the lights coming up in a room you hadn't realized was dim. I kept quiet about what I do and what I have, Because I watched what happened when my brother started his business, and suddenly everyone had an opinion about his money, and I didn't want that for myself. I wanted to help people when I could without it becoming a transaction. I looked at Faye, but when someone uses my silence to make herself feel bigger and uses my family to do it, then the silence becomes something else, and I'm not interested in what it becomes. I picked up my phone from the table. "Your private event is concluded," I said. "I'll have Petra arrange for the bill to be fully refunded since we're ending early. I want to be fair." I stepped back from the table. Faye said something sharp and short that I chose not to hear. Elliot said my name again, Ava, in a voice I hadn't heard from him since we were teenagers, and he'd done something that he knew was wrong and was waiting to find out what happened next. I went back to the host stand. I handed Petra the microphone. I looked out at the rest of the restaurant, the tables of people who had witnessed all of this. "I'm sorry for the disruption," I said to the room. "Please let us know if there's anything we can do for your tables tonight. Dessert is on the house." There was a smattering of something, not applause exactly, more the sound of people exhaling, the room recalibrating. I walked to the back. I sat in the small office off the hallway where Petra kept the scheduling binders and the end-of-night deposit bags, and I sat there for a moment in the quiet. My hands were not shaking. That surprised me a little. Petra came in after a few minutes. "Table 12 is cleared out," she said. "Your mother is still at the table. She's asking if you're coming back out." I looked at the wall for a moment. "Yeah," I said. "Give me a second. Here is what nobody tells you about being the quiet one in a family. People mistake quiet for absence. They assume that because you don't announce yourself, you aren't accumulating anything. They forget that silence is not the same as stillness, that a person can be very, very busy without making any noise at all." I walked back out to table 12. My mother was sitting alone, her hands folded on the table, her dessert menu still open in front of her like she had been considering the creme brulee this entire time. She looked up at me when I sat down. She didn't say anything for a long moment, neither did I. Then she said, "I didn't know." "I know you didn't," I said. Another silence. "I should have," she said. "I should have been paying attention." I reached across the table and put my hand over hers. Her hand was small. I hadn't noticed how small her hands were. "You can start now," I said. We ordered dessert. The restaurant came back to life around us. The music resumed. The lights went back to their normal warmth. Conversations picked up. The server who had been rattled by Faye came to take our order, the 19-year-old one, and he was steadier now, and he gave us a small nod when I thanked him by name. Elliot texted me that night. Not an apology exactly, more the beginning of one, the kind of text where someone is working up to something and isn't there yet. He said he hadn't known about any of it. He said he hadn't a lot to think about. He said Faye was upset. I said I understood, and I did, and I left it there. My father called 2 days later. That call was harder. He was a proud man, and the money had gone through me, and he hadn't told Elliot. And that meant he had kept a secret that protected Elliot's idea of himself at the expense of mine. He knew it. He said he was sorry, and the way he said it, careful and uncomfortable, told me it was real. Faye has not contacted me. I am not surprised, and I am not waiting. What I know now, that I maybe only half knew before, I had built something real. And I had kept it so quiet that the people closest to me had used the space my silence left to write a story about me that wasn't true. I let them do it because I told myself it was easier, and because I told myself I was above needing them to see me correctly, and because I had spent so long being the one who gave without asking that I had confused not asking with not needing. I needed, I just never said so. The restaurant was full again the following Friday. I went in to meet with Petra about an equipment upgrade proposal, and on my way out, I stopped at the bar and had a single glass of the good Burgundy, the one from the reserve list, the one that doesn't appear on the printed menu unless you know to ask. and I sat there alone for a little while in the low light and the good noise of a full dining room, and it tasted exactly like what it was. Something I had built, something that was mine, something nobody had handed me and nobody could take. Sometimes the quietest things in a room are the ones holding everything else up. I've been thinking about that glass of Burgundy I had on my way out. The good one, the reserve list, one that doesn't get printed on the menu. I sat at the bar alone and I drank it slowly, and I tried to figure out what I was actually feeling, because it wasn't triumph exactly, and it wasn't relief exactly, and it wasn't relief exactly, and it wasn't the queen satisfaction I think I had expected. What it was, I think, was clarity, the kind that only comes after you stop pretending something isn't true. Here is what I had been pretending, that silence was the same as peace. That letting people have the wrong idea about you was a form of generosity. That giving without being seen was noble. Maybe some of that is true in small doses in the right situations, but I had taken it so far that I had essentially handed the people closest to me a pen and said, "Here, write whatever story you want about who I am. I'll wait over here in the corner." And they did. They wrote a story where I was the one who hadn't quite figured it out yet, and I let it run for years. What Faye did at that dinner table wasn't just rude. It was the result of a story that had gone uncorrected for too long. She looked at me and saw exactly what I had allowed everyone to see. Someone without stakes, without weight. Someone whose opinion about her own life was optional. She didn't manufacture that from nothing. I had left the space open. That's the part I had to sit with afterward. Not her behavior, but my own. Because I had always told myself that staying quiet was a form of integrity. That I didn't need external validation. That I was above the noise. And some of that was real. But some of it was also fear. Fear that if I said what I had built out loud, someone would try to take a piece of it. Fear that visibility would turn me into something I didn't want to be. Fear that if I stepped into the light, I'd find out that the people I loved only loved the version of me that was useful. That fear cost me more than I realized. It cost me years of being spoken to like I had no options. It cost my brother an accurate picture of who his sister actually was. It cost my parents the chance to understand what I had actually done for them, not as a debt, but as a fact, as part of the story of our family that deserved to exist in the open. The 19-year-old server who Faye rattled with her comment about paying customers, I thought about him afterward too. About what it takes to stand in a room where someone has the social weight to make you feel small, and just keep doing your job. That takes something, a kind of quiet strength that doesn't announce itself. I recognized it because I had been practicing my own version of it for years. But there's a difference between endurance and erasure. You can be the person who absorbs things and keeps moving. That takes real grit. But if you absorb so much for so long that you stop being visible even to yourself, that's not strength anymore. That's disappearing. What I know now is that character isn't just what you do when no one is watching. It's also what you refuse to let happen to yourself when everyone is. It's having the discipline to build something real and the courage to stand in front of it when the moment calls for it. Not to perform, not to win, just to be accurately seen. I don't need Faye to understand that. I'm not sure she's capable of it right now, and that's not my work to do. But my mother's hand was small under mine at that table, and she said I should have been paying attention, and I said, "You can start now," and that felt like something worth protecting. That felt like the beginning of a more honest version of us. Sometimes the most important thing you build isn't the business. It's the nerve to finally let people see it.